Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my mid-month April 2025 AM reading update, if I'm being very kind to myself. It's been too long since I've sat in front of this camera, and I was just trying to scramble and, you know, get a lot of stuff on the to-do list done, and now this has just moved back and back, and now it seems like maybe hopefully I can squeeze in a few more videos like in rapid fire the way I did a couple weeks ago. We shall see. But now I am here, and I can say, since this is my technical first am reading video of the month, that I do have my March newsletter ready to go that I can share down below. Every month I write a literary newsletter where I aggregate the literary news that caught my fancy. I have snippets of the book reviews I wrote for the books I've read that month. I have a book pick, I have a book quote, and etc. Check it out. The big thing I do to first start these AM reading videos is first recap a short story in a literary journal, and I am currently reading from the New England Review. This is volume 45.3. This story is called Developed by Mary Clark, and it seems to have sort of a double entendre or double meaning. We're starting with Simone, who is one of the most developed girls in her middle school in terms of her breast development, and she's getting a bra in the 60s that seems a lot like a crazy contraption. That's kind of how I view undergarments in the 60s anyway. It's something that kind of freaks her out and she's uncomfortable with in the beginning. Then there are girls who are catching up, but also it's a commentary not only on actually development, physical development, but also the sexual development with boys, and how boys notice and how boys go into what we'd probably consider harassment, with like finding ways to fall and trip and grab boobs and that sort of thing. And ultimately, some of the other girls, even if they're not as developed physically or developed emotionally, in terms of, they are having sexual experiences first and sharing it with Simone. There's one girl, Lisa, who starts, I guess, that sexual development experience, and then Simone starts hanging out with another girl, Victoria. She was first developed as in academically developed, one of the smartest kids in the class, and then she comes down this, I guess, sexual development thing as well. Victoria is also black, and this is the 60s, and, in a way it surprised me there was not more commentary about that beyond these themes, these, development themes, which I guess, in terms of trying to understand Simone's response to her, physical development and, this growing sexuality with the boys, it was kind of interesting, but I don't know, I also thought, after a while it was a little strained sometimes, this whole, development theme, especially, I guess, trying to fit it all together with academic development as well, but it was an okay story. The first novel I finished, a very short novel, is The Bridesman by Savyon Leibrecht. I picked this up for my Buzzwordathon pick because I'm doing Books and Lala's Buzzwordathon challenge for covers this year using my Raid the Shelves humongous book haul I did back in last September. But anyway, this book, I think in a way you can tell that this was a short story writer who slightly expanded things and that this is a novel that's very short, and it also is very contained in a lot of ways. And it's told in these two parts. We start in Israel in the 1980s with this Persian Jewish family, very strict patriarchal family, lots of siblings in it, and a lot of, and we have this aging patriarch, and he's kind of caring for his disabled son Moshe, although we don't exactly know what his learning disability is, but Moshe's in his 30s. He has a bunch of older brothers and sisters who are established in their own ways, and they're looking to marry him off, and they ultimately find a woman. They decide, basically they're like looking for a Cinderella situation, like someone that they think that they assume they can boss around because she's not all that, doesn't have a lot going for her. And that woman is named Adela. She's actually pretty young. She's like 18. She's like an orphan, recently out of a boarding school. She has myopia and a limp. And so they're basically hoping, she's just going to, be his caretaker and do whatever they want her to do. But Adela has more spirit to her, which they don't like. And the only person she bonds with is the narrator of this story, her, soon-to-be nephew, who's about 10 years old when they meet. His name is Micha. At least that's how I would say it. Maybe not Misha, because there's not the S in it. Anyway, none of the family likes, also especially his mother Michal, doesn't like how close Micha is to Adela, this very forceful, direct woman that they weren't really expecting. And Micha is just fascinated by these aspects of her and by her interest in fabrics and in sewing, and she only agrees to marry Moshe if Micha is going to be her bridesman, in place of a bridesmaid. So Micha is like in her life basically only to be the bridesman, and then his family kind of wrests him away from her, and he's doing his own thing for a while and kind of starts to see Adela is more pitiful again. It looks like she's sort of bowing under the pressure of her in-laws. Then Micha gets sick with a fever, and when he's a few years later as a teenager, and ends up staying at Adela's and Moshe's house during that time. He's a bit delirious. Also during that time, Micha and Michal and Micha's other siblings are preparing to join Micha's father in America. So he's like ill and delirious in Israel, and then he ultimately leaves for America, and they ultimately like loses track with a lot of his family, because it seems like a family of very dysfunctional. Then his mother Michal has a major falling out with them, and ultimately gets dementia. And we're moving now into the second story, which takes place about 24 years later. Micha is now a ghostwriter, and his long-lost aunt Adela calls him back, and she says she has something important to tell him. And he arrives back in Israel and is stunned to learn that Adela is now beautiful and successful. She's had, surgeries and other treatments, and she owns a design and clothing shop in a hotel. And she explains to her nephew, like, I guess, and this is the story she's hoping maybe he'll get down for her, about her transformation and the ways that her in-laws did try to keep her down, and they were controlling her finances, they were controlling everything, and Moshe was not at all a help, but she was able to ultimately, show some more of her spunk again, and get control of her life back from them again. And just heartening in a way to hear about, like, because she's such an underdog character. Although surprisingly, I feel during the telling of the story, she doesn't stay confident. It's like seeing Micha again is like a little bit like it brings her back to that time, and it's a bit overwhelming. And she's also cagey about some other things and doesn't let Micha see her son, Elisha. And she really credits Elisha, I guess, with, being the person who is able to help her turn her life around. But she won't let Micha meet him. And there's a bit of a twist at the end, which I think some people saw coming. I kind of denied the twist for a while, because I'm like, it just seemed, it was a little out there. It's a fair bit squicky, at the very least, this twist. But we're in deep with these characters. It's a very, insular, rather interior story. I mean, there's commentary on Persian Jewish, and especially Jewish religious life in Israel, but, it doesn't really, the scope doesn't expand far beyond these characters. This is very much a character study written, I think, by a short story writer. I read Leibrecht's short stories earlier, several years ago, enjoyed those, and it's definitely feels like, that's more or less, I don't think she's going to be more expansive in her writing than this. So, that's the type of writer she is. Probably, you know, toward people who are, you know, into the character studies that are, you know, really like just a thick, you know, and we're tightly knit around the characters more than anything else. I did enjoy it. Next, I listened to A Dark and Drowning Tide by Allison Saft on Libby. This is the second book I have read by Allison Saft as well. Definite similarities to the first book I've read from her in that it is a Jewish-inspired fantasy in a secondary world. Technically, this one is adult. The characters are a little bit older, but in terms of, I think, the writing style and the characterization, there isn't much difference. But I also thought the YA novel, Far Wilder Magic, it was a lot more compelling and enticing to me. I thought the pacing and the characterization and the stakes, well, and just everything came together and was a lot more fun and interesting to follow. This one, I just think maybe there were too many characters. Maybe, you know, I actually read a blog post Saft wrote on her Substack where she said how difficult this was and she was often bored when writing it, which I don't know, maybe that plays a part. For me, other people do really like this book. It was like a contender for Romantasy in the Goodreads Choice Awards last year, so there's that. But anyway, let me, you know, summarize a little. So this is a secondary fantasy world. I'd say maybe 19th or maybe 18th century inspired, because it's not, you know, the real one, in a German-styled country. A lot of German names coming up in here. And our main character is named Lorelei. She is from a Yevonish community, you know, the Jewish coded community. Most of her people live in a ghetto. They are, you know, seen as rootless and cosmopolitan, and a lot of the, you know, negative stereotypes put on Jews throughout the ages, especially as, you know, they were, you know, kicked out of place to place and don't have equal rights for most of history, and especially in Europe. And so Lorelei, is unusual that she got out of, you know, this sort of community ghetto. She was able to get accepted into the university. She's trained as a folklorist, that she's been traveling and writing down folklores that have folklore, fairy tales and so forth that have defined the culture of her Germany-style home, of fractious states. And she really wants to be a naturalist and, I guess, study these mythological creatures, as does her academic rival, Sylvia von Wolf. Anyway, Lorelei has this mentor who is currently trying to get this expedition together to find a magical sea creature that is somewhat similar to a Far Wilder Magic, which is kind of based around capturing a magical creature and this competition to do it. But in this case, it's an expedition with Lorelei, with Sylvia. Sylvia's technically a noble, or noble adjacent. She's about to marry the king. And then there's some other peers who have different types of jobs that would be useful on this expedition. They're also nobles. And even like more in with the in crowd. Sylvia's from sort of I guess a culture that's like, you know, folded into the German nation, but they're kind of distinct as well. So Sylvia and Lorelei are the most of outsiders, but Lorelei's the most of an outsider. And so they go on this expedition, and it quickly gets derailed as the mentor who, you know, organized it is murdered. And then we, you know, Lorelei turns into the detective, basically, to discover who did it and why. But then it's a romantasy, an enemies to lovers romantasy with Sylvia, you know, that they were rivals. But as they go along the journey and there's the twists and turns, Lorelei, who's a very prickly character, you know, learns to trust and, you know, realizes that Sylvia actually is less of a rival and more of a lover, you know, that sort of thing. You know, it just, ultimately I feel like a lot of it didn't work for me. Most of the secondary characters felt very interchangeable to me, and ultimately I don't think romantasy is really my steam anyway. It's just my speed, I guess I should say. And so, you know, the romance part was okay, but it, you know, it all tends to feel a bit scripted. I mean, what I do like, I mean, I appreciate what Saft is trying to do with Lorelai's prickliness, which is to inculcate the fact that she is an outsider and that her people have been treated as second-class citizens, and that the folklore that she has been aggregating, which is very much based on actual real German and European folklore, a lot of it is steeped in anti-Semitic tropes, anti-Yevonish tropes. So that's what makes her prickly and defensive with people, and she has to realize that, I guess, with this one particular individual, she actually has a friend. And, you know, to understand the difference between, you know, the systemic cultural issues and, you know, judging individuals more personally. So that part was okay, and you know, it was fun as I read it usually, but I just, for me, or, you know, listened to it, I should say. But in general, these aspects didn't come together for me. I like the idea of the world building in the background. There's political struggle, and, you know, there's fractious states, there's people with different ideas about nationality and that sort of thing, but that wasn't as developed, you know, and so technically we were going after this magical being that never really popped for me, and the secondary characters didn't really pop for me, and the murder mystery was fine, but that didn't pop for me either. It usually doesn't. So, I don't know, it was a little bit of a disappointing second book for me, but I think for a lot of Saft's other readers and people who might like romantasy and maybe even secondary world Jewish fantasy, this one might have worked well for them. You know, definitely seemed to be her most popular book, at least going by GCA standards. Speaking of popular books, perhaps in a different direction, the next book I listened to is The SAFEKEEP by Yael van der Wouden. I got it on Audible because there was no way I was going to get this either, you know, digitally or physically from the library in time. I can't remember exactly when I put it on the holds list. I think it was about the time that my synagogue book club said that it would be reading this book, but it wasn't enough time. This book is very popular. It's a very buzzy literary book. It was shortlisted for the Booker Prize and now for the Women's Prize, which is still ongoing. I was kind of surprised when it didn't make the long list contenders of the BookTube Prize. But anyway, this is a historical fiction novel taking place in the Netherlands in 1961 predominantly. And we are predominantly following Isabel, who is this Dutch, like late 20s introvert and shut-in, basically, who has stayed in the house where she and that her uncle bought for her and her family during the war. And particularly in Amsterdam, there was like a starving summer where everybody was, you know, absolutely, you know, starving, and leaving, you know, for the countryside, and this new location was a way to save them. And so her uncle bought this home for them in the countryside, which is, you know, mysteriously all furnished, although Isabel isn't thinking about that as much in her 20s anymore. But she and her brothers first go ahead to the home, and then her mother is able to join them, and they stay there, you know. And her mother died a couple of years ago in the late 50s, and Isabel has since been a shut-in. Her brothers have moved on to start their careers and so forth, and Isabel is just somebody who sits and in judgment of everyone else and counts all of her belongings, and has some trauma from the war. And anyway, then her brother Louis, who's a bit of a player, falls for his latest girlfriend named Eva. And Eva's this, Isabel immediately judges her as being, I guess, trashy or low class with a bad hair dye do, and, you know, bad clothes, and not very cultured. And Isabel's just hoping, you know, they'll go away and probably Eva will be replaced soon. But instead, Louis has to go abroad for a month on business, and Eva insists, after a rather strained meeting with Isabel, she insists she actually wants to get to know her and stay in the house with her. And the two of them develop a relationship. It's perhaps a bit enemies to lovers again, but much more of the literary style of that. as all of this was going on, you know, I came to this book mostly through actually Jewish means. Like, it also was a winner in the National Jewish Book Awards, and I understood that it had Jewish themes about the Holocaust, which going into the book I assumed would be more overt from the beginning, but they weren't. It wasn't. And as the book grew, I could kind of understand ultimately where van der Wouden was going with the story, which culminates in the final act, which starts with diary entries by Eva, where you see she isn't what Isabel expected her to be, and she is the person who opens the door to the ways that Isabel and her family specifically, and the Dutch community more generally, have ignored and denied what they did to their Jewish populace during the Holocaust. So Eva actually ultimately is a character kind of similar to Lorelei, well, prickly, much more angry, and it's, again, a far more literary story about Judaism and the world than the last one, of course. I actually have just recently finished listening to it. In a couple of days, I'm going to meet with my synagogue book club, so I'm, you know, kind of staying on writing my review. I'm curious to, you know, talk it out with more people first. Then I'll probably write my review. In the meantime, I did find a podcast. I think it was started in part by the Jewish Book Council, but it's called 5 Books, and it's about interviewing Jewish writers about 5 books, including their own most recent book, and then others that have shaped them throughout their lives. And so Yael van der Wouden was on that. She also wrote a essay that I really need to find the time to read through more completely. It's called, you know, Not Reading Anne Frank, who is, of course, the most famous, infamous Dutch Jew who also died in the Holocaust. Yeah, you know, this was a very hyped, very buzzy book. I thought the writing was beautiful and gripping, the way that van der Wouden was able to get under the skin of her characters and describe these very tense, you know, growing tension, you know, days that populate their lives as they are, you know, building towards first towards this romantic relationship that, you know, upends Isabel's life and Eva's life, and then into, you know, bigger, you know, realizations as well. I just thought the writing is, I think, you know, worth it to be honored in literary awards. That's at least my take, and I haven't read any of the other Women's Prize shortlisted writers, but I'm definitely curious to see if this one will win. The final book I have to show you is Bitter Crop, The Heartache and Triumph of Billie Holiday's Last Year by Paul Alexander. This is a biography centered especially around Billie Holiday's final year of life. Her health is deteriorating around this time, and because she had been a heavy drinker, and it, you know, took a toll on her liver. So he goes like month by month, but then also harkens back to, you know, the past, you know, big events and tragedies as well of Billie Holiday's life as, you know, really one of the most renowned jazz singers, and certainly especially one of the most renowned female jazz singers of her age or of any age. But that is as far as I think I'm going to go now with talking about this book, because I have read it for the BookTube Prize. So the BookTube Prize was started by Robert Sheard back in 2019. The purpose is for the literary bookternet to come together to judge the best in literary fiction and nonfiction published in English in the US the year before. So this year we are judging 2024 releases. And we are in the second of 4 rounds. We are in the quarterfinals. We start with long lists of 48 books, which we then whittle down until we ultimately get to winners and runners-up in both divisions. So I am reading for the quarterfinals nonfiction Group D, and I am judging this book against 5 others on my ballot. And I have to zip my lips as we're going through the process of that. The quarterfinals will end at the beginning of June, when, you know, certain books will advance to the semifinals, others won't. I did give preliminary pre-reading thoughts on my entire ballot in a video I'll link down below, as well as a link to the BookTube Prize website more generally. So that about covers it for me now. One video down, a few more I want to get squeezed through, and I guess this final week of April, and let's face it, some of them will probably spill into May, but expect me back on this channel, hopefully imminently, with something short and sweet, my author's answer video. Every month I answer a question that author-tuber J.D. Archer and his writing group thought up and answered together. They have a large reservoir of these questions and answers they did, and I've been going through sequentially and answering them myself on my own, AuthorTube corner of my BookTube channel, so stay tuned for that. In the meantime, I know we're more than halfway through the month, so I hope your reading month has been going well in April. Thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time.